Well, thank you for inviting me to come here. My name is Jenna, and I'm the Emergency Shelter Services Manager for HRDC. So I oversee the operations of our warning centers, both the one here in Bozeman and the one in Livingston, as well as our day services here in Bozeman and our street outreach.
Right here, so here.
So I've been working in homeless services in Montana for going on 10 years now.
Wow.
I have to tell you all, I've learned a lot in these 5 years. Primarily.
You started
I started actually right about a year after undergrad. I'm from New Jersey originally, which is a whole lot against me. I'm from a very rural part of the state. And then I went to college in Vermont and did a year of AmeriCorps in North Carolina working on behavioral health programs for the military community at Fort Bragg. I hated North Carolina. I'm not a warm weather person. And I applied for mental health related jobs all over the country and was offered a position in billing, which is what kind of started me in this career. I was working for the mental health center over there, doing their street outreach program. And I have to tell you, the people that I have interacted with over the last 10 years in this field are some of the most resilient and strong and authentic humans you'll ever meet. There is that natural piece of humanity that is just really hard to find in other areas. It's also, I mean, there's a lot of hope, a lot of resiliency, a lot of kindness, a lot of humor, and a lot of anger sometimes from folks, but not at me specifically or the people that I work with, but at the systems and the society that have not set them up for success. And I think that's one of the most inspiring things about Bozeman in particular. This is a community that really cares about its neighbors. So for a little bit of background, the Warning Center opened about 10 years ago as a seasonal homeless shelter after an individual had been found deceased while seeking shelter in a youth hall body here in Bozeman. The community came together and across a few different partnerships launched our first Warning Center season in 2011, which to me sounds only like 5 years ago, but nope, that was almost over 10 years ago now. And since then, we have continued to do the seasonal warning center model. So that means we're only open in the coldest months of the year, November through March. However, this past spring, we were awarded a grant from the city of Bozeman to keep our doors open at night this past summer. So this is the first time that we've been open for year-round shelter services, not just overnight, but our day center as well, where folks can come in during the day to meet with case managers, access showers, laundry, basic needs, things like that, and have a place where they can get out of the cold and reconnect with other life-saving services. This past year, like I said, this is the first time we've been year-round for our overnight shelter. We saw over 400 people access shelter services just from November of last year through June of this year. When we went to the year-round model and over the summer months, we were expecting our numbers to go down. This past winter, we averaged around 70 people a night, and in February, this past February, we even had up to 105 one night when it was in that the last week of February this past year. If I remember, it was after the cold when even Belgrade schools had a delayed opening, which is unheard of. We had 105 people stay with us that night. We are in our new shelter, or our interim shelter, which we moved into at the end of 2020, is the old skate palace. So we've been in Bozeman for a while. It's an old skating rink. And then it was a child care facility for a little while for Human Academy, and then we moved in 2020. The building was not expected to be an emergency homeless shelter. As you can imagine, it's a roller skating rink. But we made do with what we have for right now. We are in the process of building a year-round facility at a new campus on Griffin, right by the railroad tracks in Northwestern Energy. That's called Community Commons. And the purpose for that site is to have two buildings, one for an expanded food resource center, because if you've been to our food bank recently, it is busting at the seams, and it's very difficult to navigate if you're someone seeking assistance, and it's very small. So the new food resource center that's being built right now is featured in Griffin, and you've seen that construction. That's what that will be. So it'll be an expanded food bank, resource hub, and support and soon. HRDC restaurant will move over there, so everything is co-located in one place. And then the second building that we're fundraising for right now in our capital campaign will be the new year-round shelter and resource hub. So the resource hub will have co-located programs, not just within HRDC, but also from community partners, so that folks don't have to go from one destination and then go all the way up to the hospital to meet with their doctor, and then go all the way to the food bank to go get some food. Everything will be within this one campus, which will make it so much easier for folks to access those basic needs. We have an amazing transportation system in Bozeman, which is streamlined, but if you are working or if you're on foot and you're reliant on the bus service, sometimes it can take you over 2 hours to get from one destination to the other. So going from the main HRDC office downtown, like which is on Tracy and Babcock, and then to the food bank, and then all the way to the learning center, and then back over to the Fork and Spoon, almost your entire day is spent on the bus. And my mom is reliant on the bus, and she does not refrain from telling me how difficult it can be, even though we have as much as we can. Yes,
I'm assuming that you'll house families then. It'll be families, individuals.
yeah, so at the new shelter, we will have the capacity for 130 is our goal right now, for 130 people to stay with us, and we'll have specific suites basically for family rooms. We know that family-seeking shelters also don't have, they need specific requirements or specific spaces for little ones. Our shelter right now, the Warming Center, is open from 7 p.m. until 7 a.m. and it's a big congregate space. We don't have private bathrooms or like single stall bathrooms or single stall shower rooms. We don't even have bathtubs, which is really important for little ones, along with like keeping them on those routine schedules for bedtime and waking up and going to school and things like that. So right now we're sheltering our families in the HRDC hotel, which we also purchased at the end of 2020 as part of our COVID response. We're in the smaller microtel over on Beach Drive by the McDonald's on West 7th. And so we have 12 family rooms there right now, and they're all full. We have about 6 families on our waiting list, and I know Family Commerce is seeing a similar uptick in families seeking shelter. We are what's called a low barrier shelter model. So that means regardless of someone's sobriety, mental health, or criminal history, as long as their behavior is appropriate, they can stay with us. And that's really, really important to our shelter model because we want to be screening people in for shelter services rather than screening them out based off of things that have happened to them in their past. We truly do believe that every person deserves a safe, warm place to sleep that night, regardless of what's happened to them or the things that they're coping with and struggling with. And so we work with them in that supportive approach to help identify the changes that they want to make or other services that they might need to get to there. Even if we do have to ask someone to leave because they're unable to manage their behavior that night, we're always working on trying to get them to come back and the steps that we need to see for them to return in a safe way. Let's see, what else? This past fiscal year, we, like I said, saw a little over 400 people accessing emergency shelter, but the average length of stay is only about 31 nights, or about between 30 to 40 nights. And some of that is because we do have a lot of folks that are working with our case managers and moving into permanent housing, and then there's also a large group that are coming in who maybe their vehicle broke down and they're just trying to get on their way back home to Washington. In those scenarios, we're able to help them with transportation fare to get back to permanent housing. And then the folks that are either coming here, primarily what we're seeing are a lot of people coming here for work, and then the work includes housing, and then either the job doesn't start, or something happens and they lose their employment, which then results in loss of housing. And that's a really scary statistic that we're starting to see of that increase, particularly in seasonal employment. Here in Bozeman and Livingston, we're in a very unique area we're on the outskirts of these like big tourist hubs, and so we are kind of that tourist community. So a lot of the people that are working in this industry in our tourism and outdoor adventures and all the things that bring people to Bozeman for vacations, a lot of those are folks that don't have a safe place to sleep at night and are in campers, in their vehicles, in RVs, because they can't afford the cost of living and the average rentals in the area right now. The average market rate for an apartment, a one-bedroom, is hovering around $1,900 to $2,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. So someone has to be making at least $30 an hour on their own, or be a two-income household. And this is also where we're seeing some of the young working professionals that are trying to make a home out being here, or have been here for most of their lives, and then are finding that they can't afford it because they have to leave, even if their family and all of their roots are here too. We, last November, also opened up our Bozeman's first permanent supportive housing program called Housing First Village, which are the tiny homes that we have put up next to the shelter on North 7th. And that program is designed specifically for people who have the highest barriers to permanent housing. We know that the average life expectancy for an American citizen is somewhere between 78 to 80 years old. The longer someone is experiencing chronic homelessness, meaning they have a disability and they've been in a shelter or outside for 12 months or more, the longer that continues, their life expectancy drops down to about 50. Housing First Village was the tenants that were selected for that program are specifically those who are most likely to lose life or limb on the streets and have been the frequent utilizers of our emergency services in town, so like the ER, the jail, and the shelter. And the reason why they're prioritized for that program is because they also not only are the ones that are most likely to lose life or limb on the streets, but that frequent utilization of our emergency services has a tangible monetary cost to the community, right? The more that someone is staying in the shelter, the longer they're interacting with the law enforcement, and the longer that they have to continue to access emergency services, the higher the expense on the community for those services. The cost of chronic homelessness, we did a study, this is back in 2016, but it showed that those three criteria cost the community about $30,000 per person per year. Once they move into housing, that drops down by nearly 75% to close to $11,000 a year per person. And that's just with providing housing. And that's primarily because when you don't have a safe place to sleep at night, or you don't know where you're going to get your food or shelter on a daily basis, you're in this constant state of survival mode. You don't have the capacity to think about preventive measures or to go see your doctor for a routine annual checkup. You're just trying to survive the day-to-day. And so as that happens, you end up accessing more of the emergency services more rather than the prevention services. And once you move into housing, those prevention services tend to be a lot easier to access, and that's where we see that reduction in health costs and in emergency health access. Last year, we lost 9 people who were experiencing homelessness. 9 people passed away while experiencing homelessness in Bozeman alone, just in the year 2021. Almost all of them are in their early 50s, late 40s. And so unfortunately it tracks with that statistic. But the other important thing to recognize about that is we're trying to do everything that we can within our scope, and the folks that are, the folks who passed away last year, not all of them were from like exposure to the elements or things like that, but what we also know is that the longer you're experiencing homelessness, any of those pre-existing health conditions become exacerbated simply by the sheer fact of being homeless. And so if we could have a more robust response to the housing crisis and the homelessness in our area, we're able to hopefully reduce that risk and provide more options. But what we also know is that the shelter, the warming center, is not a permanent solution, nor do we want it to be, right? It's a Band-Aid, it's a response to a cyclical issue that's not happening just in Bozeman, but across the country. However, we still know that there's a need for it, because without that, those numbers of folks who are passing away while experiencing homelessness continues to increase. So our goal for the Women's Center is to be a true service-focused shelter. We're low barrier, which means we don't hold any of the past behaviors against folks, but we also are very service-focused, so we're constantly trying to connect people to the resources that they need. The hard part, as you may know, is that even if we connect them to case management, even if they are determined eligible for rental assistance, there's nowhere for them to go after that. There's not really a big exit from the shelter if they don't have or even if they do have great credit and great income and great references, because we are hovering around a 0% vacancy rate for our rentals here in Bozeman. And the ones that are considered affordable, meaning that they're for folks who fall within like the working class income bracket, there are hardly any of those available. We had a couple of new developments come up last summer, Arrowwood and Perennial, which are over by the new ChD and Family Promise campus on Shockey, right by Lowe's. Those were almost leased up before they were even done being built. And those, there were 300 units. And we are still seeing an inability to move folks out of shelter because there's nowhere to move them into. And that's where this all crops, this intersects with not just the folks that are accessing shelter, but the folks that are having to stay with friends or family because they don't have anywhere else to go, and they're trying to find permanent housing. And we're seeing a rise in the number of people coming to the shelter who are young adults, meaning 18 to 24. We had 33 people that were ages 18 to 24 stay at our learning center this past year. And we're seeing an increase in the number of folks in the aging population that are 62 or older. We had 40 people that were 62 or older accessing our emergency shelter this past winter. And the really, really hard part about that also is that there's not only is there no traditional housing to move out into, including like subsidized if you're on fixed income, like Social Security and that's your only income. There's also, we are an emergency shelter. Folks have to be able to be independent in their daily living, which means they have to be able to change themselves, to get showered on their own, to walk on their own. And what we're seeing is the longer that those folks with physical limitations are staying at the shelter, again, their pre-existing health conditions are getting worse and worse. And it's very difficult for our staff to be able to make those accommodations for folks who maybe need an assisted nursing home or an assisted living facility, and they just don't exist. Or they have extremely long waiting lists and are very dependent on health insurance. So if you're low income, you're on fixed Social Security, that's your only income, you get Medicare or Medicaid, there are only a few number of assisted living and skilled nursing facility beds that can take out health insurance. And they typically, if you go into a nursing rehab facility, we've had a lot of struggles with folks who need that service, but because they're experiencing homelessness, are having a hard time getting in because the nursing facilities need to know they can discharge someone into a safe and recovery-focused housing. And it's hard to do that in a big, open, congregate shelter where you're surrounded by 70 other people that are also struggling. So I just talked for a long time, and I'd like to open it up to questions that any of you might have. Just around like housing or homelessness in the area, what the warming summer does, in addition to what I explained, and anything else.
You seem to have a very positive attitude, and I don't understand how you can maintain that for years.
It's the people. I have, and honestly, part of my own self-preservation is not getting too bogged down into the larger systemic issues. Because we have an amazing community development department at HRDC whose primary focus is responding to the housing crisis at large. For me, I focus on what's right in front of me, the person in front of me, and making that connection and knowing that those are things that I can't control. Everything that's happening in the world, everything that's happening in our community, in the country, in our state. But what I can control is having a good interaction with someone who's really struggling and making them feel like there's somebody that cares about them and that they have a connection with somebody. Because as humans, that's all anybody wants, is have to build connection and have community. And so many of the folks that are experiencing homelessness right now, there's this ongoing sentiment that they are invisible, right? Or that they are lumped in with the same people that are finding signs on the intersections of like the on-ramps to the interstate or the off-ramps. And those folks also feel invisible, right? And they're doing what they have to do in that moment or what they feel like they can do in that moment. And yeah, I think that's what it comes down to for me. Is the resiliency I get from the people I work with, both my coworkers, volunteers, and the guests that stay with us in the shelter. Pretty amazing humans. There's one individual that I started in billing. I met him at the where I was at the street outreach program in Billy, which is 2012. Flash forward to 2014, I moved to Bozeman, and maybe a couple of years later, he comes into the learning center. I'm like, what are you doing over here? Like, it's not really you. I met you like 3 years ago in Billy. He's like, oh yeah, I'm from here though. This is an individual who just turned 60. He grew up in immigrant, but unfortunately did not have a healthy family structure and was passed around to different family members throughout most of his young life and adult life, or emerging adult life as well. And the coping skills that he had, he learned from his parents and his siblings and his family that those were not healthy coping skills. He continued to experience homelessness in Bozeman, and I worked with him on case management, applying for different housing options. He's one of the ones that fell into that frequent utilizer of emergency services and moved into housing first village. And it's amazing to think of when I first met him almost 10 years ago to where he is now. He never thought that he would make it to age 50, and he celebrated his 50th birthday in housing. And this is someone that most people just write off as a felon or an alcoholic or someone who just looks really angry and scary, but inside there's this broken human who needed to build connection. And I say broken not to mean like indefinitely broken, but someone who, like all of us, has had terrible or scary or traumatic experiences in our lives. And the difference is that he never really had anyone that was positive to support him to get out of it. So whether that happens when you're a child or 49 years old, that ability to trust and to be vulnerable with someone who's had different experiences than you is a huge testament to that human character. And it's amazing to see. I mean, and also moving into housing when you've been outside for a long period of time, there's an adjustment often back and forth, like adjusting to being in housing and then adjusting to trying to set healthy boundaries with your friends who've been homeless with you but weren't selected for that housing and are now putting your housing at jeopardy. Like, you're feeling bad, right? Because this is your battle buddy. You've been outside with them for 5 or 10 years. And here you are in housing and you see them still in the shelter. So how do we navigate that? And that's a hard thing for anyone to be able to do. And part of it is by building a new community and adjusting and recognizing that they're going to be backslide. People are going to relapse. They're going to have those adjustment periods to reintegrate back into housing or back into a different community. And that's okay, because that's part of human nature. When you have gone so long without and you're in this scarcity mentality, it takes a while for that for you to be able to readjust. So, people are amazing. Even when they're grumpy, and I love the grumpiness. because I get it. I would be grumpy too. I would be pissed off. I would be angry. And it's not because of me, or it's not because of the person I'm talking to. It's because of all of these life experiences, and I haven't had anyone to have that positive connection before. I've had people that have survived with me, right? And that's often what we see, or folks who, out of necessity, build these connections on the street. And that's why I make that joke of like battle buddies, but they really are. This is who you survived with for however long. And it takes a lot to reintegrate back into it. About 40% of the people that stayed with us this past winter or this past season reported to be living with a disabling condition. So that also doesn't necessarily mean that they're not working. There's a large portion of our shelter community who are working full time or sometimes 2.5 jobs just trying to save up enough to be able to move into housing, and are also struggling with physical health issues that they haven't been able to get taken care of because they don't have a permanent place to recover. 1 in 3 identify as female, and so we are seeing a little bit of an increase in our female population. Something new this year too, though, is an increase in the non-binary population. So folks who don't identify as male or female and are very, very vulnerable to being taken advantage of. We also are seeing that the military veteran population that are accessing shelter is going up as well. And most often, those are folks who don't either think that they deserve or qualify for veteran benefits, or have dishonorable discharge, or don't know what resources they might qualify for. And even just admitting sometimes that they're a veteran, they're not comfortable doing. And so it it all kind of depends on the individual, and that's also how we connect them to the different resources based on what their comfort level is. Yeah.
When I was growing up, there was a large population that were in these county homes or even mental institutions. Those mental institutions don't exist anymore.
Yes.
How many of those are in your population?
Yeah, that's really interesting, and that's what, like, I often reflect back on. In the past 10 years that I've been in this field, I definitely saw more of that in the beginning, because that was around the Reagan era, right? Like late 70s, early 80s, when they shut down the institutionalized mental health facilities, which, for both good and bad, a lot of the ones that were stayed around at that time were very poorly managed. And I mean, for example, my husband's grandmother was in one in California, and if it weren't for his parents to take care of her when it shut down, she would have been experiencing homelessness and struggling with severe mental health. We're starting to see fewer and fewer from that era, I think just primarily to age. But we also recognize and know that there is an extreme lack of mental health services available, not just in Bozeman, but in the state. Our one previously state-funded inpatient mental health facility in Warm Springs no longer has the reimbursement contract for Medicare and Medicaid, which means that I actually don't know how they're reimbursing for those costs, but that is the only facility in the entire state of Montana that is a court-ordered inpatient facility. When we don't have the full breadth of mental health services in the community for folks to step down out of the state facility, people fall through the cracks so easily. We have a plethora of private mental health providers in Bozeman, but most of them are in private practice and have significant waiting lists. The community mental health center here, formerly Gallatin Mental Health Center, now Western Montana Mental Health, up by KB, up by the hospital. Their outpatient services are still there, and also running into extreme waiting lists. That's also where Hope House is located, in the emergency detention area of Hope House, which is for folks who are in the process of being court ordered for mental health treatment. That's closed as well. So if someone is basically the only area is for voluntary. So if someone is saying, yes, I have thoughts of hurting myself or someone else, I voluntarily want to go into treatment. The alternative, and more of what we see, are the folks who unfortunately don't have the awareness that they need mental health support and are unable to meet their basic needs because of their mental health. On the flip side, if that then escalates to a place where it's unsafe for them to be in the shelter because they're putting other people at risk of safety, we have to ask them to leave, but there's also nowhere for them to go because law enforcement, rightfully so, are not mental health professionals, nor can they screen for those behaviors. All they can do is take someone into custody if they report that they're at risk of hurting themselves or someone else, when in reality they're at risk of hurting themselves unknowingly because of their mental health, because they are unable to stay in the shelter because of the psychosis or the things that they're seeing or hearing that aren't really there, which then results in sometimes the safety issue and they're being asked to leave for the night, and they're as a result having to sleep outside sometimes in this kind of weather. We try to avoid that at all costs, but at some point when you've got 80 people, 10 of them are struggling in similar ways, we try to de-escalate and redirect and connect them to other things that can keep their minds preoccupied, but doesn't always happen. When they're having to sleep outside because of their mental health, but they're not directly saying to an officer that they're at risk of hurting themselves or someone else, so there's nothing legally that they can do either. The mental health services in our community, maybe you've seen in the news, but Bozeman Health, the county and city are working on creating an emergency co-responding or basically like a co-responding system where a behavioral health professional goes with an officer when responding to calls, and then it's still in infancy in being developed, along with acute psychiatric care that could potentially be where folks could go rather than having to go into the state hospital or involuntary commitment. Again, we're still in infancy. I mean, there's a long way to go, but it's very encouraging to see that it's being developed.
Well, why did that Hope House close? I mean, I have a son-in-law that was in office in so, felt so good about having a place to take these people. And then now that closed and they don't have that option.
Yeah.
Then what happened there?
The volunteer unit is still open.
Is it?
It is, however, it's only 6 beds. And so if it's full, then officers have to take folks to the ER and they do what they call sit on them, which means they have to stay and supervise the person while they're waiting for them to get evaluated for a bed in another community. However, you go to another community and you don't have support set up when you get back. And this is where you're living and working. The emergency side, or the emergency detention side of Hope House, so that's the one where even if someone isn't expressing that they're that they have a direct threat, if there's a clear observation that this person is a threat of hurting themselves or others, they would be evaluated to the ER and then potentially put into this emergency detention hold unit. And I'm not sure exactly why the contract is broken with the county. And basically the county was paying for the emergency detention beds to be open. And I'm not sure exactly why they weren't able to keep them open, but that's why it's closed. The county had to cancel the contract or break the contract. Or not the county broke the contract, but something happened that the contract was broken. And as a result, we weren't able to use those emergency beds anymore.
Maybe I missed this at the beginning, but are there steps or things that we can do to help make a difference? Like, what would be your big, like, action items that we can take?
Yeah, honestly, the last 2 months have been, we had to close our day services at the shelter because we didn't have enough staffing for the overnight shelter. So all of our day staff were working overnight up until recently. We just reopened last week on Wednesday for day services, and we are now fully staffed for our overnight shelter, which is amazing. It took a long time to get there. And now I think, there are a variety of different ways that you can get involved. So we have volunteer shifts on our website that you can sign up for if you're an early morning person, 5 to 7. We love volunteers in the early mornings because our staff are there sometimes from 6:30 p.m. all the way until 7:30 in the morning. And being able to stay awake for those 13 hours, especially from like 2 to 5 is the witching hour where everything just kind of gets a little blurry and you try to just walk around just to stay awake. So early morning volunteers, we also have evening volunteer opportunities. Those are from 6:30 to 9. And donations. We're in the middle of our fall supply drive, and so this is where we're stocking up with all the supplies we need throughout the year. So toilet paper, paper towels, cleaning supplies, hygiene products, toothbrushes, toothpaste, anything under the shampoo, conditioner, everything was in that as well. What we're bringing. Clothing items, that's a really great question. Bozeman is a really generous community and have more clothing than you know what to do at this time.
I see.
We even just recently got a huge donation of brand new, still with tags, winter jackets and winter gear from North Face and Fauna and Columbia and like all of these like really good brands that are going to keep people warm in the winter. I don't know where the donor came from, but they're new with tags, and so it's really fantastic to see the generosity from the community. I will say gloves, however, we are short on winter gloves. We also are swimming in socks at the moment, and we can always use more feminine hygiene products as well.
Is there a list of your wants on your website?
Yes, there is. Our supply needs are listed on our website as well. Since it is part of our fall supply drive, we do this twice a year. It's right on the home page, and so you just click on that, and it'll bring you to the list of all the cleaning supplies you need and that we're trying to stock up on, and all the hygiene products as well.
I bet we could even collect them here
Absolutely.
and then, have a,
Yeah. Our day services are open Sunday through Thursday from 9 to 4. From 9 to noon, it's open access, so folks can keep sleeping from if they were there from overnight, and then they leave at noon, which is also really, really helpful and new what we're doing this year. Because as we know in the winter, 7 a.m. is usually the coldest part of the day before the sun wakes up. And so making folks leave at 7 in the morning has been, is really, really tough for both the staff and the guests. And so this year, our days the day center is open. We're not closed in the morning. They leave at noon. And then we're closed from noon to 1 Sunday to Thursday, 1 to 4 Sunday to Thursday, where we can drop off donations. And that's also when we do our recovery groups and one-on-one appointments.
So I'm wondering a little bit about what happens with school-age children. Because you're talking about, leaving early in the morning and, how are they getting nutrition and how are they getting to school and...
Yeah, so that's why our families are not in the actual shelter.
Right.
They're in hotel rooms at the HRDC hotel down the street, and they don't have to leave at any time.
Okay.
They go with their own schedule, partly because we recognize that's really important.
And then as far as like food and things, are they just utilizing the food bank or?
Food bank, work consumer, we don't have the ability to prepare meals at the learning center, nor do we have the authorizations in the city to do that.
Right.
We mostly just get a lot of snacks and ready-made meals, things that can be microwaved from the food bank for folks who aren't able to go there during the day, they're working or whatever the case is. And then the board of students will does the Pay What You Can dinner Sunday through Thursday as well.
And
And
then-
the Salvation Army drops off staff lunches during the day too.
And then as far as transportation, if a family doesn't have a vehicle, is there a service provided?
Yeah, the
community?
community bus stop actually is just right there in
Buses.
the corner of
Okay.
Mandeville and 7th, so right at Bobby's Casino. And then they get dropped off across the street and straight away. And then the blue line picks up at Walmart. So most folks, if they don't have their own transportation, walk over to Walmart and then from there they can get pretty much anywhere in town. And they work with the school liaisons too, if they do have little kiddos, to ensure that the kids are able to go to the same school, even if they're not living in that same area anymore.
Over the years, we've been so impressed with what HRDC does. Yet it kind of falls below the radar again, even for us. We've been doing a long time. And every now and then we get kind of recharged. That kind of helps. You're doing that. But you do a lot of this kind of thing?
Yeah, we're, the fall is kind of mine and my supervisor's speaking tour areas. And then we also, so if you have other community groups that you're part of, and would like you to speak to, I'm more than happy to come do that. I've been to, my husband's a member of the Eagles, so I go there. I've been to the Legion, speak to the veteran group, the Kiwanis Club. That was a few years ago. But yeah, if there are other community groups that you're members of, I'd love to come.
Something that just popped up on my radar indirectly that I did this week. It turns out that one of your volunteer opportunities on food bank is packing bags of groceries for seniors. And I participated, our Rotary Club sponsors a Rotary group. That was their service project last week, was to go there. And it's kind of fun. It's a variation on the Packathon thing. It's a real madhouse, and then you have no idea of the passage of time or anything. It seems like you just got started good, and you're done. And in fact, our group volunteered in like an hour and 15 minutes, filled with 2 giant bins with stuff.
Yeah, the senior groceries program is really, really helpful. It's similar to Meals on Wheels, but it's more specific to like folks who need the groceries, that's the meals ready to go. And about the passage of time, feeling like it's not happening, the same thing happens at the learning center. Whether I'm there during the day or at night, I think I'm going to tell my husband, I'm only going to go for a couple hours tonight, I promise. I know I worked all day, but I'm only going to go for a couple hours. And suddenly I've been there for 4 hours. Where did the time go? And it's, I think the difference too with the food bank and the learning center volunteer opportunities is a lot more customer or guest interaction at the learning center, because a lot of the volunteer tasks are guest relations. And so just kind of talking to folks and helping them get food offers and storage and or getting a snack we're just playing chess with people. Oftentimes they'll be used to. Any other questions?
You talked about 9 people that died in the last year.
Yeah.
When people get caught, really can't take care of themselves, then what do you do?
We work very closely with the hospital. Oftentimes those folks are seen in the ED or the emergency room. And at the time, the hospital staff may not have enough collateral or background information to be able to admit them. But when we see this pattern, for example, we have an individual who has Parkinson's, but also struggles with alcoholism. So when he would come to us and he would be sober, we would see that like he was able to change his own clothes, he was able to go to the bathroom unassisted. But then he would go to the hospital, and unfortunately, with struggling with alcoholism, that's all that he was being treated for was the alcohol, not the underlying, because they didn't see it, right? Because it's being masked by the alcohol. So when I'm able to then have that relationship with hospital staff and say, no, actually, so-and-so, when we see him, he can't get dressed on his own, he can't go to the bathroom on his own, he's wetting the bed, and he's forgetting he's having memory issues, he's constantly shaking. Because those symptoms can be very similar to detox, but with more thorough background history of what other people are seeing in his living environment, we were able to get him admitted and then into the skilled nursing home for the help that he actually needed. We were very close to him.
There's a fundraising project. What is that?
Yeah, so this is also a really unique opportunity where we're not only raising funds and supplies for our existing shelter, which we are also, I would be remiss if I didn't say that we love monetary donations as well as supply donations. I'm really bad at asking for money though, so I tend to lean more into the supply. I feel so guilty about it. We're also raising we're in the midst of our capital campaign for the new facility. So that is a $15 million project for both the expanded food resource center and the emergency shelter and resource hub. And we've so far raised up to a little over 11 million. So we're very, very close. Once we hit the 15, we'll be able to start breaking ground on the new shelter facility. Right now, we're only, the development is happening on the food resource center side of the property. But once we get to that 15, then we'll be able to get started on other things. And that's just from philanthropic donations and foundations and community members who are supporting the effort.
Are you letting people know about this?
Yeah, so there's, you should have brought them with me. We've got these little cards that have information about what we have in common, which is why we call it community commons. And those are advertised, well, I think there's something that's going into the paper today, maybe, on our website and different speaking engagements, and different events that keep popping up with some folks that want to come very for the working center. But Dawn, she's not here right now, but she does have my contact information as well, so if you think of anything afterwards, you can reach out to her and she's always connected. I left my business cards at home. I am unfortunately not a morning person, and being awake before 9 is usually something, so I'm very sorry about that. I'm a bit of a night owl, I guess makes me working in a good field.
Well, thank you for doing what you're doing.
Yes.
So thank you. I love these types of conversations. I grew up in a typical household, and I remember, like, as a kid going to our local church, and my mom and I would just be in awe of, like, all of the different facets that the faith community supports the larger community at large, and thank you for being interested and for.
I think if people know about it, that's so important.
But we do know about literally hundreds of
Exactly.
causes, hundreds.
Yep.
And, last week it was children in Haiti, and we were packing stuff for them. But, so somehow, even HRDC has to somehow bubble to the surface. And I don't know how that can happen. That's, you're doing it, but,
Yeah.
we're not too many here right now.
Well, I'm more than happy to come back if you'd like as well.
I wish that more people had heard your talk.
We'll post it on the website. Get people to.
Hopefully you can edit it a little bit without all of my stammering for
You
speaking.
did great. So, no, I think we can see your passion, and we appreciate your time this morning. So thanks for,
Happy to come back.
thank you very much.